Alright, this is my game jam, the first one I've ever done for Spring Jam 2023. The theme for this was spring and the world. So I created a very pleasant walk in the woods. This is supposed to be like a park that you can walk around with and enjoy. So I used a third-person template project and then set it up to use a metahuman that I created. So you can run around and explore in third-person view. I created a master landscape material to set up all the different vegetation here. This trail actually has different grass foliage types set up to automatically add sticks and rocks and leaves and debris to the hiking trail. Also created some ambient sounds. Sounds are supposed to be ambisonic and react realistically with 3D audio. The landscape itself was created through a third-party tool called Gaia. It generated a height map that I imported into Unreal and created a relatively realistic looking mountain, much better than something I could handcraft. A lot of the trees were also generated procedurally using procedural volumes, and some of it was hand placed using the foliage tool. I was able to layer different types of plants to create a somewhat realistic looking forest. Also used various Megascan assets to add details and create more realistic looking ruins and castle pieces that may have been some fort a long time ago. Also created this lake with just a 2D plane with a nice water shader. And the lily pads were also painted on with the foliage tool. So this is a view of the entire terrain. Basically just surrounds this lake on top of this mountain. You have a main park entrance there with a road that goes off in the distance. At the time, I didn't know how to set up collision maps, so some of these assets didn't have collision. But I do know how to add that now for a lot of these things. See what the player collision is set to, which is currently nothing. So I could add a simplified collision to it now if I wanted to. But we'll leave it as is. I'm still learning. So the landscape was created with the master material. Let's take a look at that. So it has a few different features. It has different layers for different types of textures. I'm using Megascan materials for the most part. It also will scale depending on the parameters you set and the distance from the camera, so you can make sure you don't get any weird tiling effects when you're looking at it. and you can customize it with different materials. So I have a dirt layer, you can adjust the tiling size. So as you zoom out, this texture scale will change to make it look better in the distance. So if you look at these mountains, you can see how it changes depending on the distance of the camera. So theoretically, it should always look good no matter where you're looking. So the grass layer has some other extra features too. It has the ability to generate grass meshes automatically. So whenever you use a grass or mud layer, it'll automatically put down a grass mesh here using the grass type system that Unreal has. So this is the grass type variables. You can add the different grass meshes here and then adjust how they're placed and playing around with that. Also for the mud layer, I decided to create it into like a hiking trail that you could just paint on. So these rocks and little sticks and branches actually appear automatically on the grass material, and it has different parameters to adjust the density. I have dry leaves, sticks, and it all adds a nice bit of randomization to that, so you don't have to go around hand placing random objects on the dirt. I'll definitely continue experimenting with that. So the first time I messed around with that, I actually had the rock layer too high, and it had some very interesting results. So you have the different densities here. So I had that like 2, do like 400. Let's see if that does anything. Oh yeah, so now we have much more rocks on the trail. So for all those different meshes in this array, you can set it up to appear how often. So it was a nice adjustment to the tool. I feel a little clever coming up with that. It does have some problems though, like sometimes the meshes will kind of stick up at weird angles, especially some of these sticks. They're not quite flat on the ground, especially if it's very bumpy ground. So it was definitely worth experimenting with. The landscape tool was a very interesting tool. This is my first time using a third-party program to generate the height map. So this whole terrain was created by a procedurally generated system that adds different layers, and then you can export it. It made some pretty realistic looking mountains and erosion. It does a little bit more realistic job than what this tool, the built-in landscape tools, can do. And of course, you can go in and adjust it manually too, once you get a really nice height map going. But it created some very nice realistic terrain. And this was just using the free version of Gaia 2. I exported a 1024 map. You can get much higher detail with the paid version. For a lot of the trees, I use a procedural volume. That's what these squares are. Procedural foliage volume. So you can set different meshes in there for your trees and create a forest automatically. And you can actually simulate the growth of a forest with this tool. And you can re-simulate it and adjust how dense of a forest you want it to be, what kind of trees are spawning. And it gives you a whole set of tools to adjust the life of the trees and their size. You have different types here. So you can kind of create a realistic looking forest with different heights for the age of the tree. These are using from the City Park free assets, but you can also do the same thing with Megascan trees, and they have the different lifespan models for young trees and older trees and all the fun stuff for the seasons too. So I definitely didn't optimize this at all. It's using a lot of high quality assets, Megascan textures, and City Park trees, but it still runs pretty well, thanks to Nanite and the other technologies that Unreal has. This was my first attempt at a game jam. I only had about a day or so to work on it, so I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Working with a deadline definitely forces you to get creative. So like I had some Megascan rocks here to make the mountains look a little bit better. It's a little sparsely populated because of the constraints of time, so I just created some different points of interest that you can run around and explore. No menu or anything else gameplay related to speak of, but I've been studying and learning how to create more gameplay mechanics through Game Dev TV. But I'm quite happy with the results. It's a nice little walk around a park, very simple game. The sound stuff was pretty interesting too. I'm always a fan of realistic 3D sound, so I started learning how to adjust some of this. Let's see. Here we go, the meta sounds. So for this, for the bird sounds, I created this meta sound loop. So it kind of takes the wave sound effect from some free bird sounds I found, and it kind of puts them through a random timer. So it's on a loop essentially, but it's not going to just play repeatedly. It has a random interval, so it'll play it at different times. And I believe the sound itself was set to be set with the different Unreal sound technology, so I can do directional sound, stuff like that. Still a lot to learn in this area, but I was experimenting with it, trying to get all that stuff set up. There it is, the audio spatialization. Definitely a lot of interesting things with meta sounds. So I did the same thing with the wind, put it over the lake, and it'll randomly play a wind sound to simulate a breeze passing through the woods. And of course, these cherry trees. Those were not free, those were like 20 bucks, but I definitely like cherry blossoms. Didn't have a wind shader, so they're kind of static, but they had this nice little particle field, the cherry blossom leaves flying around. It's definitely very cool. Little nice place to follow. So no direction to the player, you just kind of dropped off here. There's a little trail you can follow, but you can pretty much go anywhere, including right off the map. But I know how to do collisions and stuff now, so I can create a more constrained area in the future. I'll definitely have more gameplay elements too as I work on my other projects. The next project I am working on is kind of a 2D platformer. That one's probably going to be more pixel art and less realistic, but I'm going to be using the different Megascan assets and kind of combining them with pixel art. So that'll be a fun experiment to see how those turn out. But I'll try and do some of the pixel art myself, but there's a lot of free assets I'll try and take advantage of too. So that was my first game jam, and I think it came out pretty good. Even got featured on somebody else's YouTube video, although they didn't find the nice cherry blossom park. But that's how you learn.